Hi, class. Happy Friday. Hey, it's chapter 11 today, the Little Mr. or Miss Muscles competition. Coach Weeks stood in the gym with his arms crossed. Martha Cherie was behind him holding a clipboard. All right, line up, you kids, bellowed Coach Weeks, really drawing out the last word. Believe me, if I could call you all of you maggots, I would, but the school handbook makes it very clear that I cannot. Got it? Nobody said anything as we formed a line. Coach Weeks looked us up and down and then shook his head in disgust. Your generation has been pampered by video games and seatbelts and such. When I was a kid, the seatbelt just went across the lap. No shoulder strap. And the only video games we had were crappy, terrible graphics. You'd die 3 times and have to start all over again. No saves, but we still played them all day anyway. And we didn't complain. We stared at Coach Weeks, confused. What are you getting at, Coach? Said Dylan. My point, D'Amato, is that when I was young, everything was harder and also better. That's why I've decided to bring back Little Mr. or Miss Muscles. In the year 1983, probably the peak of human civilization, we knew what a real test of physical fitness was. We didn't toss little flying saucers around at stuff and call it sport. The first disc golf game was played in 1926, said Dylan, crossing her arms, in Baldworth, Saskatchewan. Yeah, right. You made that up, D'Amato. You and I both know Saskatchewan isn't a real place, said Coach Weeks. Anyway, zip it. It's time for Little Mr. or Miss Muscles. The first feat in this legendary competition is knuckle ups, a true test of arm owl and shoulder owl strength. Whoever does the most in 30 seconds wins. I earned this. He held up his trophy, barely recognizable since it had been taped back together, by doing 18 knuckle ups. I raised my hand. What if, hypothetically, someone couldn't do any knuckle-ups at all? Then that would be completely humiliating, and everyone would probably laugh at that person, said Coach Weeks, hypothetically. Great, I said. I felt Hamster-saurus Rex stir. He poked his head out of my pocket and growled in Coach Weeks' direction. It was like he could sense when someone was making fun of me. Easy, pal, I whispered as I shoved him back down. If you eat him, I'll probably have to retake this stupid class. Coach Weeks blew his whistle. You ready with that clipboard, Cherie? He said. Martha nodded and held it up. It's the Rensselaer Executive Model, a Smiles Corp product, the choice of scorekeepers everywhere. Hang on, said Dylan. Martha doesn't have to participate. My parents arranged for me to do my Little Mr. or Miss Muscles in advance, said Martha, matter-of-factly. The college admissions process is very competitive these days, and they figured that any little bit might help. Of course that's what happened, said Dylan, gritting her teeth. Coach Weeks shrugged. Enough chitter-chatter. On your knuckles, D'Amato. Get ready. Get set. Go. Dylan did 21 knuckle-ups. Martha jotted it down. Coach Weeks could barely believe it. Got to get this stopwatch checked, he grumbled, holding it up to his ear. All right, you're next, Joy. You don't want to play disc golf for the rest of the year, do you? Let's see you do 22. Jimmy Choi dropped to his knuckles, and so one by one, each of the students in our class did as many as they could. I gradually shifted myself down the line until I was standing at the end on the far side of Wilbur Weber. I was pretty sure I couldn't do a single knuckle-up. I hoped Wilbur wouldn't be able to do one either. If there were 2 of us in a row, maybe I wouldn't look quite so pathetic. Maybe. Look alive, Weber. You're up, said Coach Weeks. Now only Wilbur and I remained. According to Martha's count, Dylan was still in the lead by 4. On your knuckles, son, said Coach Weeks. Go! Wilbur Weber flopped on the ground and laid there motionless, just as I wished. For nearly half a minute, the class stared at him in uncomfortable silence. There's the picture. Coach Weeks sighed. I wondered if Wilbur had actually fallen asleep. But somehow, 1 second before time was up, he grunted and did a single, perfect knuckle up. What? I cried. Come on! Everyone looked at me. I mean, good job, Wilbur. I said, way to go, buddy. Perseverance. He shrugged. It's showtime, Gibbs, said Coach Weeks. Let's see what those little noodle arms can do. And when I say noodle arms, as per the school handbook, I don't mean that as an insult. I love noodles. Eat them with ketchup. Anyway, on your knuckles. I think I can save us all some time, I said. Just mark me down as 0, Martha. Thanks. Nope, said Coach Weeks. On your knuckles. Really? He nodded. I laid on the ground, careful not to squish Hamster-saurus Rex in my breast pocket. I could hear the other kids starting to snicker and whisper among themselves. Get set. Go, cried Coach Weeks. I took a deep breath and tried to mentally prepare myself for 30 seconds of humiliation. But instead, a funny thing happened. I did a knuckle up. Then I did another. And another. I was doing knuckle-ups. They were so easy. I realized this was because Hamster-saurus Rex was the one actually doing all the work. Inside my pocket, the little guy was jumping up and down, bouncing me right off the ground. Man, he really was as strong as a dinosaur. The other kids weren't laughing anymore. They had fallen silent. Stop, cried Coach Weeks, punching his watch. I sat up and smiled. I'd barely broken a sweat. Everyone in the class was staring at me, wide-eyed, especially Coach Weeks. 45, said Martha. At that, the class let out a cheer. Everyone except Beaver, of course. That's 114% more than knuckle-ups than Dylan, Martha added. How did you do 45 knuckle-ups? Asked Coach Gibbs, scratching his head. Beginner's luck, I said with a shrug. Wow, Sam, I didn't know you had that kind of knuckle power, said Dylan, slapping me on the back. She smiled, but it looked a little forced. All right, that means Gibbs is in first place, D'Amato's in second, and then after her is McCoy. While nobody was watching, I gave Hamster-saurus Rex a quick belly rub. He closed his eyes and kicked his foot back. Now it's on to the second little Mr. or Miss Muscles fitness feat, the fabled rod bend, said Coach Weeks. Everyone grab one of these. He indicated a plastic barrel full of shiny metal rods, each a 1/4 inch thick. We all took one. Hold your metal rod like so, said Coach Weeks, grabbing it by both ends, and bend it as far as you can in 30 seconds. Now watch and learn. Coach Weeks took a deep breath and then started. He quivered and strained. His mustache fluttered like a frightening bird. With a high-pitched shriek, he managed to bend a metal rod ever so slightly. Time was up. Panting, Weeks took a protractor from Martha and measured the angle of the bend. 161 degrees would have been better, but I recently hurt both my arms saving an old woman from drowning. When I won Little Mr. Muscles back in 1983, I did 145 degrees. Now that was an epic bend. He looked at us like he was expecting someone to ask for the whole story. Nobody did. All right, fine then. Coach Weeks looked at his stopwatch. Rods up. Everybody, on your mark, get set, bend. We all attempted to bend our rods. Mine wouldn't move at all. Dylan was bending hers a little. Wilbur Weber was using his to clean the inside of his ear. Nobody was watching, so I whispered to Hamster-saurus Rex, if there's any way you can handle this one, there's another belly rub in it for you, possibly a behind-the-ear scratch. The little guy seemed to understand. He popped his head out of my pocket and opened his jaws wide and bit down hard on the middle of the rod. There he is. The force of his dino chomp practically folded the thing in half. I held the two ends until the time was up. Coach Weeks blew his whistle. Stop bending. Rods down, people. Rods down. One by one, he inspected our metal rods and measured the angles with his protractor. Martha recorded the results. He whistled when he saw mine. 15 degrees, he said after measuring and re-measuring. He looked at me with genuine suspicion. How'd you manage that, Gibbs? I've been bending stuff around the house for practice, I said. I was skeptical at first, but now I feel like little Mr. or Miss Muscles is more than just a bunch of weirdly outdated, possibly dangerous fitness tests for kids. It's about giving it your all and seeing if you really have what it takes to be number one. It's about becoming a champion. Gibbs, honestly, that's beautiful, said Coach Weeks. He wiped a tear from the corner of his eye. Write that down, Cherie. Martha started writing. Sam, I thought you forgot about little Mr. or Miss Muscles, said Dylan. I was about to reply, but Coach Weeks interrupted. You're just sore because he's beating you, D'Amato. For the rod bend, we have Gibbs coming in first. Again, D'Amato in the number 2 spot. And in third place, we have, Vanderkoff, who is automatically disqualified because he broke my trophy the other day. Whatever, said Beaver. This class is dumb, and I hate everyone except, He glanced at Martha. She kept on scribbling on her clipboard. Beaver kicked his metal rod across the floor of the gym with a loud clang. Never disrespect the rod bend, Vanderkoff, said Coach Weeks. Principal Truitt's office. Now. Beaver shrugged. He probably spent more time in the principal's office than the principal did. Cherie, said Coach Weeks to Martha, escort Vanderkoff to make sure he actually gets there. Last time I sent him on his own, he somehow managed to start a fire in the water fountain. Martha raised her hand. May I ask a question? Coach Weeks sighed. No temporary leaving class won't affect your attendance record. Dylan rolled her eyes. If eye rolls had been part of the competition, she would have easily won. Martha nodded and handed the Rensselaer executive to Omar to keep score. Then she and Beaver, who seemed perfectly happy with his punishment now that it involved Martha, left together. All right, this is the final portion of the competition, said Coach Weeks. It all comes down to this, kids. Can you feel the electricity? Nobody could. I turned my back to the other kids and gave Hamster-saurus Rex a quick round of victory scratches in my pocket. It was the least I could do. Welcome to the 60-foot sandbag drag, said Coach Weeks, waving dramatically. On the floor of the gym, sitting at a starting line, was a sandbag the size of a pillow. It had a heavy rope tied around it. Competitors dragged the sandbag a distance of 60 feet, said Coach Weeks. To there, he pointed to a finish line on the other side of the gym. Whoever does it the fastest wins. This is literally the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, said Dylan. Quiet, D'Amato, said Coach Weeks. On your mark. Dylan walked to the starting line, rolling her shoulders. Get set. Dylan spat in her palms, grabbed the end of the rope, and threw it over her shoulder. She nodded to Coach Weeks. Go, he cried. Dylan strained and dragged the bag across the floor at a slow jog. I could see the effort in her face as she crossed the finish line. 10.4 seconds, called out Coach Weeks, looking at his stopwatch. Not bad for having the wind at your back. We're inside, said Dylan, wiping the sweat from her brow. There isn't any wind. It was the air conditioning then, said Coach Weeks. The 60-foot sandbag drag looked hard. The sandbag itself was massive. I doubted I could move it an inch, much less 60 whole feet. Still, by the time it was my turn, I was feeling pretty confident. I think you know what to do, amigo, I whispered to Hammy Rex. He looked me square in the eyes and burped. That's Hamster-saurus Rex for we're on the same page. Martha and Beaver were gone, so I decided I could risk it. I opened my pocket, and he jumped out and scurried across the floor, Jim. I walked to the starting line and grabbed the rope. Wow, even the rope was heavy. You can do this, Gibbs, said Coach Weeks. Sure, when this class period started, I thought you were pathetic, a physically weak specimen who likes drawing little pictures more than doing important stuff like sports. But you proved me wrong by winning 2 out of 3 Little Mr. or Miss Muscle events. Now I see you've got the fire in your guts. You've got the champion's will. He leaned in and whispered, Gibbs, you have the spirit of the velvet shark. No, I said, thumping my chest. I've got the spirit of the dinosaur hamster. I don't get it, but I love it, said Coach Weeks, slapping me on the back. All right, on your mark, Gibbs. Get set. Go! I pulled the rope. The sandbag wouldn't budge. I gritted my teeth and strained with my whole body. At last, the bag shifted. I started to walk, then run. Faster and faster, the sandbag trailing behind me. Everyone cheered me on. It only got weird when the sandbag actually sped up and passed me. Hey, not so fast, I said. You got to make this look convincing. The bag slowed just in time for me to pass it and cross the finish line. Coach Weeks blew his whistle. 7.7 seconds, he cried, staring at his watch. 7.7 seconds. Unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a new Little Mr. or Miss Muscles. The class exploded in applause. People patted me on the back and shook my hand. I smiled. It was the nicest anyone had been since seeing their Sam Gibbs caricatures. Congratulations, Sam, said Dylan, giving me a bear hug. If it wasn't me, I'm glad it was you who won. I win a lot of awards for participation, said Wilbur Weber to no one in particular. You keep this up, Gibbs, said Coach Weeks, beaming as he shook my hand, and you could be the next me. It was a terrifying thought, but not enough to bring down my mood. Yes, I'll admit that it felt pretty good to be crowned the new Little Mr. or Miss Muscles. I poked my index finger into my pocket and gave Hamster-saurus Rex the smallest high five. There he is. Hey, and that's it for chapter 11. I think something's going to happen. I think Beaver's going to be in the next chapter a lot. What do you think? What about that visit to the doll museum he's supposed to take with Martha Cherie? Maybe that's in the next chapter. I'll see you tomorrow, and we'll figure it out together. Take care.